Dear viewers, sometimes life reminds us that miracles don't always come from science or wealth. Sometimes they come from the most unexpected hearts. Today's story will touch you deeply. It's about a billionaire whose only son was born deaf, a boy who lived in silence for 10 long years, and a humble maid who had nothing but faith and courage. When everyone gave up on the child, she did something no doctor or fortune could ever do. This story will take you through love, guilt, redemption, and the power of listening with the heart. It's not just about hearing sound, it's about finally hearing truth. So before we begin, dear viewers, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're watching from, because what you're about to hear is one of the most powerful stories of hope you'll ever experience. Now, let's begin. The courtyard of Grant Industries shimmered under the afternoon sun, its marble floors so polished they mirrored the sky. Employees in suits rushed about with tablets and briefcases, speaking in the language of business and ambition. But amid all that noise, a small boy sat quietly on a stone bench, unmoving, untouched by the chaos. His name was Oliver Grant, the only son of billionaire tech mogul Lucas Grant. Deaf since the age of 2, Oliver had grown up in a world where sound was a mystery, where even his father's voice existed only in memory. Lucas walked briskly past the fountain, phone glued to his ear, his words sharp and impatient. "Push the deal through by Monday. I don't care how." He didn't see his son glance up at him, didn't notice the small flicker of longing in the boy's eyes. For Lucas, silence had become normal. He'd accepted it as part of his son's condition, something no amount of wealth could fix. He'd spent millions on doctors, specialists, machines, all of them had failed. And somewhere along the way, he had stopped trying to connect. Then, that afternoon, fate decided to intervene. A thin, barefoot girl stepped onto the courtyard, clutching a tray of wilted flowers and tiny carved trinkets. Her clothes were old, her hair messy, but her eyes carried a strange, calm light. Security guards usually drove her away within seconds, but today they were distracted. Her name was Laya. She walked hesitantly between the pillars, her feet leaving faint prints on the marble, until her gaze fell on the quiet boy on the bench. Oliver was sketching something on a pad, a bird with open wings. He didn't see her at first. Laya watched for a moment, noticing the faint sadness on his face, then slowly moved closer. "Hey," she said softly. Of course, he didn't respond, so she tried something else. She raised her hands and signed, "Hello." Oliver froze. His eyes widened. No one ever signed to him except his speech therapist, and that too, rarely. He looked up at her, his hands trembling as he signed back. "You know how to talk like this?" She nodded with a gentle smile. "A little," she signed. "I had a brother who couldn't hear." For the first time in years, a spark lit in Oliver's face. He motioned for her to sit beside him. She sat carefully, setting down her tray. He showed her his drawing. "Bird," he signed proudly. "It's beautiful," she replied. Then, noticing him scratch his ear with a frown, she asked, "Hurts?" He nodded and signed. "Itches." Without thinking, Laya leaned closer. "Hold still," she whispered. She gently tilted his head. Something small and dark glistened deep inside his ear. She froze, realizing it was moving. Carefully, with trembling fingers, she reached in and pulled out something alive, black, slick, wriggling. "A small insect," Oliver gasped. Then everything changed. A blaring car horn sounded nearby, sharp and loud. Oliver's body jolted. His eyes went wide. He clutched his ears and looked around wildly. For the first time in 8 years, he could hear. His lips parted in disbelief. And then he spoke, voice cracked, trembling, but real. "Dad." The single word echoed through the courtyard. People stopped walking. Phones dropped. The fountain's steady rush seemed to vanish under the weight of that one small, broken voice. Lucas froze mid-step. Slowly, he turned toward the sound he'd dreamed of hearing for a decade. His phone slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble. "Oliver?" he whispered. The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Dad." It was barely a whisper, but to Lucas, it was thunder. He stumbled forward, dropping to his knees in front of his son, gripping his shoulders. "Say it again," he begged, voice breaking. "Dad," Oliver said, louder this time, trembling but clear. Lucas's breath caught. Then, fear and confusion took over. He turned sharply to the barefoot girl. "What did you do to him?" His voice rose. "Get away from him. Security." Guards rushed forward. Laya backed away, shaking her head. "I didn't hurt him," she cried. "He can hear now." "Stop lying," Lucas shouted. "My son is deaf." Before anyone could react, Oliver stepped in front of her, spreading his small arms as if to shield her. "Don't hurt her," he shouted. Lucas froze. His son had just spoken again. The sound of his voice cut through the noise of the crowd like a miracle. For a long moment, no one moved. The billionaire who could buy anything in the world stood trembling before a barefoot girl who had given him the one thing he couldn't purchase, the sound of his child's voice. Security stood frozen, unsure whether to grab the girl or wait for instructions. But Lucas didn't speak. His throat closed as Oliver turned toward him again, whispering, "I hear you, Dad." The words were broken and uneven, but they were real. They carried more power than any sound Lucas had ever heard in his life. For a long moment, father and son just stared at each other, one trembling in disbelief, the other hearing his own heartbeat for the first time. Then the chaos began. Within an hour, the hospital was flooded with reporters and doctors. They called it a miracle, an unexplained recovery, something they had to study. Lucas paced the hallway like a trapped animal, his hands shaking, his mind racing through years of tests, surgeries, and empty promises. He watched through the glass as doctors surrounded Oliver, attaching monitors and whispering in confusion. Laya stood quietly in the corner, barefoot, her hands still trembling. Every few seconds, she looked toward the boy, making sure he wasn't afraid. She had no idea what she'd done, only that she had helped. But to Lucas, she was a mystery he couldn't process yet. He kept replaying the moment in his head, her fingers reaching into his son's ear, pulling something dark and moving. How could it be that simple? How could a girl with nothing do what all his money had failed to do? A tall man in a white coat approached him. "Mr. Grant, the obstruction has been removed. We're running full tests, but his hearing response is real." "Obstruction?" Lucas repeated. "You mean there was something inside his ear for 8 years and no one noticed?" The doctor avoided his gaze. "We followed all medical protocols." Lucas's voice rose. "Protocols? My son was trapped in silence for a decade while you ran your protocols?" His anger filled the corridor, but beneath it was a deeper pain, the guilt of a father who had believed every word these people told him. The doctor cleared his throat and handed him a folder. "You might want to see this." Lucas flipped it open. Pages of reports filled with charts and signatures, each one stamped permanent condition. But one line near the end made his stomach drop. "Maintain diagnosis to preserve long-term funding. Grant account approved." He stared at the words, unable to breathe. "They profited from him," he whispered. "They kept him sick." The paper slipped from his hand. He turned to the doctor. "You sold my son's silence." The man stepped back, mumbling, "I only follow procedure." Lucas slammed his fist on the wall. "Procedure? You turned my boy into a business plan." Laya flinched at the sound of his rage, but her eyes didn't waver. "He's right," she said softly. "They didn't see Oliver. They saw your money. You trusted them because they looked clean, wore white coats, and spoke like angels. But angels don't file paperwork that keeps children suffering." Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. Lucas looked at her for the first time, really looked. Her clothes were torn, her feet bare, her hands scarred. yet her eyes carried a strength he hadn't seen in years. "Who are you?" he asked. She hesitated. "Someone who knows what it's like to be unheard." He wanted to ask more, but the door opened and the nurse called out, "Mr. Grant, you can see him now." Inside, Oliver sat upright in bed, smiling shyly, holding the stuffed bear his father had given him years ago but never saw him play with. Lucas sat beside him, speechless. The boy looked up, his small fingers reaching out to trace his father's lips as he spoke. "Does it hurt?" Lucas asked. Oliver shook his head and whispered, "No, it's loud." Lucas smiled through tears. "That's what the world sounds like, son." For a while, they sat in silence, though this time it wasn't empty. It was full of everything Lucas had missed: the hum of the monitor, the rustle of the sheets, even the soft sound of Oliver's breathing. Later that night, after Oliver fell asleep, Lucas found Laia sitting by the window of the waiting room. The moonlight made her look almost fragile, yet her gaze was calm. "Tell me the truth," he said. "How did you know to look inside his ear?" She shrugged slightly. "I didn't. I just saw him scratch and thought maybe something was wrong. I used to do the same for my brother." Lucas's eyebrows rose. "Your brother?" Her lips trembled. "He went deaf when we were kids. We didn't have money for doctors. I tried to help, but one night his fever got worse. He died before morning." The air between them went still. "I never forgot the way he used to touch my face," she continued, "like he was trying to feel my voice. When I saw your boy do the same thing, I couldn't walk away." Lucas swallowed hard. "You saved my son," he said quietly. "You have no idea what that means." She met his eyes. "Maybe I do, because I once prayed someone would save my brother too." For the first time, Lucas felt something break inside him, something pride had built long ago. He sat down beside her, the weight of guilt pressing down. "I spent years paying for experts, for machines, for hope that never came. I thought money could buy everything, but it couldn't buy this." Laia smiled faintly. "That's because miracles don't come with price tags. They come from people who care." He turned to her. "You're young, yet you talk like someone who's lived 100 years. Pain teaches fast," she said simply. They both looked through the glass at Oliver, sleeping peacefully under the white hospital light. Lucas had never realized how small his son looked, how fragile, and yet, somehow, stronger than ever. As dawn crept through the window, Lucas whispered, "I'll make this right. I'll destroy every system that profits from pain." Laia turned to him, her eyes steady. "Then start by listening, not to the doctors, not to the world. Listen to him. He's been talking in silence for years." The next morning came quietly, but inside Lucas's chest, a storm brewed. He hadn't slept at all. He sat by Oliver's bed, watching his son trace invisible circles in the air, maybe trying to describe the sounds he was hearing for the first time. Every little noise made him flinch. The squeak of shoes in the corridor, the clatter of metal trays, the rhythmic beeping of monitors. The world had opened up for him, but it was overwhelming. Lucas reached out and gently held his hand. "It's okay," he whispered. "You don't have to be afraid of the noise." Oliver looked at him with tired eyes, then slowly smiled. "I like your voice," he said softly. The words pierced Lucas's heart. He had spent a lifetime commanding rooms full of people, giving speeches, negotiating billion-dollar deals, yet this was the first time someone had told him his voice mattered, and it came from his son. Later that day, the hospital administrators asked to meet him. They gathered in a conference room filled with glass walls and fake smiles. Lucas entered with Oliver's test folder in his hand, followed by Laia, who stood silently behind him. The chief doctor cleared his throat. "Mr. Grant, we're happy for your son's recovery. However, I must caution that cases like this..." Lucas slammed the folder on the table. "Cases like this?" he cut in sharply. "You mean miracles that expose corruption?" "Sir, please." "Don't sir me," Lucas barked. For 8 years, you told me there was no cure, no chance, no hope. And now, when a barefoot girl fixes what your machines couldn't, you want me to stay quiet?" The doctors shifted uncomfortably. One muttered, "You don't understand how medical funding works." "Oh, I understand it perfectly," Lucas said coldly. "You kept him sick because it kept you rich." The room fell silent. Lucas turned to Laya. "Tell them what you saw." Laya looked at each of them, her calm voice steady. "You didn't even check the boy's ear. You treated him like an account, not a child. If you had cared, if you had listened, none of this would have happened." The oldest doctor tried to defend himself. "Young lady, we followed protocol." Laya's eyes glistened. "Protocol doesn't make you human." The sentence hung in the air like thunder. Lucas stared at her, realizing she wasn't just speaking to them, she was speaking to him too. For years, he had followed his own kind of protocol. Work, success, money, numbers. He'd forgotten how to be human too. When they left the hospital, the press waited outside. Cameras flashed, microphones waved in their faces. "Mr. Grant, is it true your son was cured by a street girl?" one reporter shouted. "Do you plan to sue the hospital?" another asked. Lucas stopped and looked at them all. For the first time, his voice wasn't arrogant or defensive. It was calm. "My son can hear," he said simply. "And that's all that matters. The rest I'll deal with in time." He took Oliver's hand and started walking. Laya followed silently behind, barefoot on the cold pavement, unnoticed by the cameras that were too busy focusing on the billionaire and his boy. That evening, Lucas brought them both to the mansion, a massive house that had always felt empty despite its gold walls and marble floors. When the car stopped at the gate, Laya hesitated. "I can't go in there," she whispered. "Why not?" Lucas asked. "People like me don't belong in places like that." Lucas looked at her for a long moment. "People like you," he said slowly, "belong everywhere miracles are needed." Inside, the house was silent, a silence that suddenly felt different. Oliver ran from room to room, laughing awkwardly at the sounds of his own footsteps. He clapped, knocked on walls, even shouted just to hear his voice echo. The servants stopped and stared, whispering in awe. For years, the boy had been quiet. Now his laughter filled the halls like music. Lucas watched him, tears threatening to fall. "I've never heard him laugh before," he murmured. Laya smiled softly. "Then let him laugh. He's catching up for lost years." Later, in the dining room, Lucas sat across from her as she ate shyly, unused to the silverware and bright lights. "How long have you been on the streets?" he asked. "Since I was 15, she said quietly. "After my brother died, I had no one. I started selling flowers near hospitals. People looked through me like I didn't exist." Lucas leaned back, guilt twisting his chest. "I was one of those people," he admitted. "I used to think the poor were invisible because they wanted to be." She met his eyes. "We don't want to be invisible. We just get used to people not seeing us." The words hit him hard. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He realized that for all his wealth, he had lived blind and deaf, not because he couldn't see or hear, but because he hadn't wanted to. When the night grew quiet, Laya helped Oliver to bed. She sat beside him, brushing his hair gently while humming softly. Lucas stood in the doorway, watching her. The sound of her humming filled the room like a lullaby, and for the first time in years, peace settled in his heart. When she stood to leave, he stopped her. "Thank you," he said. She smiled. "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Grant. I didn't heal him. I just removed what was blocking him." He frowned slightly. "Still, you gave me back my son." Her eyes softened. "Then maybe he'll give you back your heart." He looked at her, unsure how to respond. As the moonlight spilled through the window, Lucas walked to the bedside and knelt beside Oliver, taking his small hand. "You can hear now," he whispered. "But I want you to know, I'm the one who was truly deaf. I stopped listening a long time ago." Oliver's fingers moved slowly, spelling words he'd been taught long ago. I love you, Dad. Lucas broke down completely, tears spilling as he hugged him tightly. Behind them, Laia quietly stepped back, tears in her own eyes. She had seen miracles before, but never one like this, not the return of hearing, but the return of love. The next few weeks changed everything. News of Oliver's recovery spread across the city like wildfire. The media called it the miracle at Grant Industries. Cameras flashed outside the mansion gates every morning, waiting for a glimpse of the billionaire's son who had defied science. But inside the house, Lucas wanted no part of the noise. His focus was on Oliver and the barefoot girl who had unknowingly changed both their lives. Laia tried to leave quietly one morning, her tray of flowers back in hand, but Lucas stopped her at the gate. "Where are you going?" "I don't belong here," she said softly. "You've done enough." He looked at her for a long moment. "You gave me back my son. You belong wherever gratitude lives." She smiled faintly. "I'm just glad he can hear again. That's all I wanted." But Lucas shook his head. "No, Laia, you didn't just make him hear. You made me listen." She lowered her gaze. "Then keep doing that. Listen to him. Listen to the people you once ignored." That day, Lucas returned to his office at Grant Industries for the first time since the incident. The board members greeted him with polite smiles, pretending nothing had happened. But Lucas was a different man now. He looked around the glass conference room filled with people who had helped fund the hospitals that had lied to him. "We've made billions from partnerships with those clinics," one director said proudly. "They're our strongest clients." Lucas leaned forward, his voice calm but cold. "They're parasites." The room went silent. He tossed a folder onto the table. Inside were the medical records, the falsified reports, the proof of greed. "They kept my son sick for profit. You all signed off on it." The board members shifted nervously. "Lucas, you can't just—" "I can," he interrupted. "And I will." Within hours, Lucas announced a full audit and cut every partnership tied to corruption. Stocks plunged, investors panicked, but he didn't care. For the first time, he wasn't protecting wealth, he was protecting truth. That evening, as he sat with Oliver on the mansion balcony, the boy rested his head against his father's arm. "What are those sounds?" he asked. Lucas smiled. "Crickets. They sing at night." Oliver grinned. "They sound happy." "They are," Lucas said quietly. "They're free." Below, in the garden, Laia watered the flowers she had planted around the fountain, the same place she had first met Oliver. She worked silently, barefoot as always, her face peaceful. A few days later, Lucas called a press conference. The hall was filled with journalists, flashing lights, and murmuring voices. Laia stood to the side, uncertain why she was even there. Lucas stepped up to the podium, his voice steady. "For years, I trusted systems that profit from suffering," he said. "I believed progress was made by machines and money. But one girl reminded me that compassion can do what technology never will. Today, I'm launching the Hear Me Foundation, a global program to fund free medical care for children who can't afford it. Every child deserves to be heard." Applause filled the room. Laia stood frozen, tears glistening in her eyes. She had no idea he would do this. Lucas turned toward her. "This foundation exists because of her." He pointed gently. "Her name is Laia, the girl who gave my son his world back." The cameras turned to her. She looked down, shy and overwhelmed. Reporters surrounded her, asking questions, but she said nothing. All she whispered was, "I just did what any human should do." After the event, Lucas found her alone in the hallway, staring out the window. "You changed more than my son's life," he said softly. "You changed mine." Laia shook her head. "I didn't change you. You just finally saw what was always there." He smiled. "Then maybe I needed to go deaf to learn how to hear." The next morning, she was gone. Her small room in the guest house was empty, her few belongings folded neatly on the bed. On the dresser lay a single note. "Thank you for listening." Lucas found it and stood silently for a long time. He felt a strange ache in his chest, a mix of loss and gratitude. He walked to Oliver's room, where the boy was drawing again. On the paper was a picture of the fountain, and beside it, a barefoot girl holding a tray of flowers. "Do you miss her?" Lucas asked. Oliver nodded. "She taught me what sound feels like." Lucas smiled gently. "What does it feel like?" Oliver thought for a moment, then said, "It feels like love." Lucas hugged him tightly. The sound of his son's laughter filled the room, uneven, loud, imperfect, but beautiful. For the first time, the house wasn't just big, it was alive. Months passed. The Hear Me Foundation grew rapidly, opening clinics in small towns and poor neighborhoods. Lucas personally visited the first one, where children lined up for checkups. Some had infections, others had conditions no one had cared to treat. He sat with each parent, listening to their stories, really listening. One day, a small boy ran up to him, holding a new hearing aid. "Mr. Grant," he said proudly, "I can hear now." Lucas smiled, kneeling down. "That's wonderful, son. Who helped you?" The boy pointed to a mural painted on the wall. It showed a barefoot girl standing beside a fountain, holding flowers. Underneath, the words read, "In memory of Laya, who taught the world how to listen." Lucas's breath caught. He placed his hand on the painting gently. "You'll never be forgotten," he whispered. Outside, as he left the clinic, the wind carried the soft laughter of children, playing a sound that once felt impossible. He looked up at the sky, smiling through tears. "Thank you," he said quietly. Back at the mansion that evening, Oliver ran through the garden barefoot, chasing butterflies. He stopped by the fountain, the same spot where everything had changed, and turned toward his father. "Dad," he said. Lucas looked up from his chair. "Yes, son?" Oliver smiled. "I hear the water now. It sounds happy." Lucas's voice trembled as he answered, "That's because it finally has something worth singing for." He walked to his son, lifted him up, and spun him around as laughter filled the air. The laughter of a boy who could finally hear, and a father who had finally learned to listen. Dear viewers, sometimes we chase everything in life, money, fame, success, and forget the simplest miracle, compassion. Laya had nothing, not even shoes, but she gave the world something priceless, the power to hear again, not just with the ears, but with the heart. What would you have done if you were Lucas? Would you forgive those who kept your child in silence? Or would you fight for truth the way he did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories that remind us the richest people aren't those who own the world, but those who finally learn how to listen.